Galloway's Tech Talk at 3, AI and Digital Accessibility with Robin Spinks from RNIB.
So welcome everybody to Galloway's Tech Talk at 3. Absolutely delighted to be joined by the one and only Mr. Robin Spinks from the RNIB. And I hope I've got this right, Robin. You are the Head of Innovation and Technology at the RNIB.
That's very kind. Something like that. I think it's strategic lead for innovation partnerships. But yeah, I do lots of things innovation at RNIB. So yeah, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Excellent. So I think my version is easier to remember, I think. So that's why I went with that one. So excellent. It's great to have you with us today. We had you probably over a year ago. You came and spoke to us. Last year. We've been running loads of these tech talks, and we've had some fantastic speakers, and it was great when you joined us last year. And we've got some new people with us today, Robin. So it'd be good to start with maybe just a little bit of background about who you are and what you do at the RNIB. That would be great.
Yeah, sure, I'll do that. So thanks again, everyone, for having me. So I'm Robin Spinks, strategic lead for innovation partnerships at RNIB. I've worked in the disability sector for most of my career. So to be honest, I've got 20 years in the disability sector, which has flown by. That's across a mixture of public and private and government related stuff, but mostly working for NGOs. So working internationally. I spent quite a bit of time working in Africa and South Asia and the Caribbean. And then also working here in the UK, based in Scotland, but traveling all over the UK. And working essentially most of it around ensuring that employers understand disability and a specific focus on sight loss to ensure that barriers can be broken down. And technology has been a huge part of that for me. So technology became a big bit of my career, probably about 14 years ago, when I worked for Sightsavers International, who are a large medical NGO. And I was really asked by the CEO at the time to take on a new role, which was slightly different to the one that I'd been recruited to. I was running their advocacy program in countries around the world, and doing a lot of advocacy training with national blindness and disability agencies. But I'd always had a really big interest in tech. And the CEO approached me and said, look, I want to sponsor this new role, and I'd love it if you were interested in it. So that's kind of code for your moving job. Fortunately, it was something I was very happy to accept and to do. And that brought me into working with tech companies, mostly working with a lot of companies that you will know the names of very well. So companies like Freedom Scientific and Dolphin and AI Squared. And what we were doing at the time was trying to get sustainable, low-cost assistive technology in countries where it just didn't exist. We're trying to set that up and get training in place, get software in place, and get really what we would call a supportive ecosystem in place. And that was really challenging in a lot of markets, a lot of countries where, there isn't a lead disability organization that's involved in tech and involved in innovation. So trying to sometimes generate that out of nothing was a big challenge, but it was one that I really, enjoyed. And it was fantastic to be able to kind of make progress in that area. I then moved to RNIB actually nearly 12 years ago. I happened to find myself in a position where there was an opportunity that had come up to join, and it's just been a fantastically interesting place to be. Every time I've thought about moving on, something interesting has come along, and it's made me stay. And I think, for all of us on the call, I think one of the things that maybe heightens our interest in technology is just something that unites us all. So I think because we've all got experience of sight loss. So for me, I was born with a condition called albinism. So I've always had vision that could be considered severely sight impaired. I think the hardest thing for me is actually to describe how that affects me, because I have absolutely no idea what normal vision is like. I've never had normal vision. So
Yeah.
I know how much I can see on a chart, and pretty much I can see the top letter of the chart. But I've also got a good field of vision. Don't have any restriction on my peripheral vision. That makes it easy for me to do lots of things that involve moving around fast, cycling and running and, you know, various other things, even playing the odd game of football. You know, I can do that because of my visual field actually is fine. And the other thing that happens as a result of that is that it creates the impression for other people that I can see quite a lot more than I actually can. And a lot of people on the call will have come across this, where you've got to explain to somebody, you know, how much vision you've got or how your vision's impaired. And you know what, there's sometimes there are days where you think, that's okay, that's cool, I'm really happy to do that. And then I think there are days where you're maybe not feeling it and you think, oh my God, I just can't be bothered explaining it. And it's quite hard sometimes, isn't it? So
yeah,
that's
I mean,
something that brings us together.
You're okay kind of, you know, walking around your home and you were fine. So why can't you see that? That's what people say things to you. And it's like, well, because it's not my familiar environment. That's the important takeaway, isn't it? People can't distinguish that. If you put me somewhere or put you somewhere, Robin, where we've never been before and we don't know where things are, then that's where we become a little bit stuck, a little bit lost. But now we reach for our iPhone or we reach for our piece of tech that can help us, you know, in those unfamiliar environments.
You know what's so interesting about that, Andrew, and a lot of people on the call, I'm sure, will relate to this as well. Over the past year, I've been fascinated by how many blind and partially sighted friends have said things to me like, do you know what? I actually don't feel disabled being at home all the time, because at home, I know where everything is and I don't experience barriers in the same way that I normally do. Do you know, when I'm going to meetings and I'm traveling around and I'm out and about, I experience barriers on a day-by-day basis. But working at home and being based at home, I'm not feeling that same sense of, you know, of exclusion or challenge. And that's, of course, a temporary situation. But I just think it's fascinating when you start to think about, you know, working from home, being based at home. And it'll be really interesting to hear people's experiences of that as we go through the session. And I think it's really timely that you mention, you know, finding things, Andy, because, you know, one of the first things I thought would be really good to talk to you about today is something that's all about finding stuff. It's fair and square in the middle of that mission to find things. And in fact, it's called Find My, and it's the Find My app on the Apple platform. And there's a couple of reasons why I wanted to talk about that. Shall I just segue in? Is that good? Shall I? Go
for it. Yeah.
One of the things that started to happen just around about the time of the Apple conference at the beginning of this month was that companies started to put out announcements that their items worked with the Find My network. So if you have an iPhone or an iPad or a Mac, you will have come across the Find My app. And if you haven't,
lots of times.
You should definitely look it up. Absolutely. So what started to happen is that it's now possible for people to build support for Find My into their items. So one of the first companies to do it was actually a Dutch bicycle manufacturer, a Dutch e-bike manufacturer called Van Moof. And they announced around about the time of the Apple conference that the Van Moof bikes had compatibility with the Find My app. And the brilliant thing about Find My is that when you go into it, it will allow you very, very easily to check the location of all of your Apple devices. So that's great. You know, my first proper tangle with the Find My app a few years ago was kind of a situation that I found myself in. I lived in London at the time. I'd come up to Glasgow for a meeting, and I was in the meeting, and the person I was meeting with said to me, "Are you okay?" And I said, yeah, I'm good. Why, do you ask? And he said, there's a look on your face. He said, you've just realized something. And I had.
You lost something.
I'd actually just realized that I had left my backpack with my iPad in it on the train.
Oh, no.
And I got off at Glasgow and I thought, oh, no, that train, I happen to know, because I'm a little bit sad when it comes to transport. I happen to have more than an average level of interest in transport. And I happen to know that that train was going back to London Euston. So I thought, I know what's happened. That bag is on the train and it's on its way back down to London. So I opened the Find My app on my iPhone.
Yeah.
My very considerate and helpful colleague went off to get a coffee for us. And I opened the Find My app and I could see that my iPad was doing 110 miles an hour and it was going down the West Coast Main Line. And actually, the thing that was reassuring about that was I could see it passing Carlisle. And I thought, okay, so it's on its way back down to London. So the cleaners who checked the train over at Glasgow clearly didn't spot my backpack, which was tucked under a seat. It's always good when you realise that things like that haven't been spotted. There could have been something sinister in there. There wasn't. But what happened was I watched the iPad making its way down the West Coast Main Line on a map, on the Find My app. And I thought, this is brilliant. I can see my iPad. I can see how fast it's going. I can see where it is. I could watch it heading for, Preston. I could see it heading down the West Coast Main Line, tracked it all the way, Warrington, Wigan, Crewe, all the usual route, tracked it going back down. And then I'd actually rang Virgin Trains, as it was at that point, pre-Avanti. And I told them, and they said, okay, well, what we'll do is we'll meet it when it comes into the station. So their cleaners had a look at the train, met the train, had a look at it, and they rang me up and they said, your bag's not on the train. It wasn't on the train. Your iPad wasn't on the train. So I thought, okay, thanks, guys. So I rang the British Transport Police and I said to the person I spoke to, I've got a bag and it's on a Pendolino train. It's currently in platform 9, I think it was. It's in the front car because I'd been lucky enough to get a first class upgrade. Could you go and get it for me? And they said, yeah, give me 2 minutes and I'll nip over. So he went over, phoned me back 5 minutes later. He said, no problem, Robin, I've got your bag. Now, it was a very dark grey coloured backpack on a grey carpet under a dark seat. So it's just possible that nobody spotted it, right? Because they kind of weren't saying, look, it's not there. They just said it's not there. There's no bag. We can't see it. And of course, I knew it was there because I could see it on the Find My app. So I said to this BTP sergeant, British Transport Police sergeant, what happens, if you had got on the train and you hadn't been able to find it? And he said, well, it's fine. He said, I'd just jump in the car and I'd head round to where it is. And you'd tell me where it is. Because Find My would say to you, your iPad is in such and such a street and it's at this number. And I'd just go to the door and I would say that I'm here from the British Transport Police and I'm here to recover someone's iPad because you're telling me live that you can see it. I didn't need to do that. That was great. I got it back the day later. But what's happened with Find My is it's now got compatibility with a whole bunch of different devices. And at the Apple conference, Apple made available something called an AirTag. And I've got an AirTag. I'm going to show it on the screen. It's about the size of a £2 coin, right? So imagine something that was maybe twice the thickness of a £2 coin, but about the same size, minus the serrated edges. And it's got a kind of mirror aluminium finish and a little white Apple logo on one side. And in the back of it is white plastic. Yeah, and it's a glossy feel. When you feel it, you can feel an indent on the edge of the AirTag. So you could run your finger right around that. There's a definite edge. It doesn't have anything that you can use to fix it to anything. But listen, it's Apple. There's an upsell. So Apple have got a whole ecosystem of key rings and, things that you can clip it into. So I bought a little key ring. This is just a little cheap one I got on Amazon.
I was going to say, you don't have to get the official Apple ones, do you?
You don't.
You don't get, yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, I mean, it's crazy. There are companies that are charging hundreds of pounds for fancy leather key rings just to go with this. But, you know, I just bought a cheapo one from Amazon. It was a couple of quid. Yeah. And what you do with the AirTag is I've actually got a little fastening button on the key ring, and I've unfastened that. And the key ring essentially has a leatherette frame, which is round and into which the AirTag fits. So I'm going to slide the AirTag inside this keyring. And then what I'm going to do is just feel with my fingers that it's all in place. And then I'm going to press the metal stud on the top of it down. And what it's done is it's actually secured the AirTag inside the leather key fob frame. Yeah. And the little metal button that's at the top of it has pushed down to clasp it together. And that's linked to a ring, a regular key ring. And on that key ring, I've got 5 keys on that ring. What's great about it is that the battery that powers that AirTag is a completely standard circular battery that you can buy in any corner shop that sells batteries. It's totally standard. This is Apple, guys, making something standard.
And it lasts for about 12 months, doesn't it? I think the battery.
It does. Well. You know, if you think back to the Apple of a few years ago, they would have put a proprietary battery in. You'd have to go to the Apple store to take it out, and it would have been expensive. This is a cheapo, everyday circular battery. And actually, what I was able to do was get the battery out myself and snap it back in and close it up. Incredible, super easy. What's lovely about it, though, is that on the Find My app, I introduced this AirTag. Super easy to set up. I introduced it to the Find My app, and I called it Robin's Keys, because it's got my keys on it. You could attach one to anything you wanted. So some people have attached them to backpacks, maybe to laptop bags. Some people have even attached them to their dog, to the dog collar. I know somebody who's put one inside the handlebars of a bicycle. So it's limitless what you could attach an AirTag to. My wife even says that she's planning on getting one for me, so she can attach it to me so that she knows where I am. Kind of like that idea as well. Literally what you can do is I can take the Find My app. Now I'm going to turn the camera off for a moment, and that's just because I'm going to dive into the Find My app on my phone. So I'm just going to pull up the Find My app, and if I go into it, I can see that there are lots of different things that are in there, right? So I happen to have an iPhone, I've got an iPad, I've got an Apple Watch, I've got a pair of AirPods, and I've got an Apple TV, right? So I've got quite a few Apple devices. I've got other brands as well, but it just so happens I've got quite a few Apple devices. Now, I've also added into this, there's a little tab called Items. And when I've gone in there, that's where I've added the AirTag. And I've got this item called Robin's Keys. So I can see on here that it says that they're with me. I'm going to just take them and move them to the other end of the office just to demonstrate this. So I've taken them and popped them to the other end of the office. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to see whether we can get that to play a sound. So I'm going to tap play a sound. So you might be able to hear that chirping.
Yeah.
And then I can also hit find if I want to. And it says that they're nearby. And in any iPhone, you would be using Bluetooth, right, to be able to find the AirTag. If you have an iPhone 11 or any of the iPhone 12, you can use Bluetooth, but also a capability that's built into the 11 and the 12, which is called ultra wideband. Now, when you use ultra wideband, it gives you a much, much more accurate range and much better accuracy. So I'm going to use this, and it says that it's looking. It says they're 3 feet away, and it's got a great big white arrow on the screen pointing to the right. It says they're 4 feet to my right. Okay. I've moved across the office. They're now 3 feet to my right. The screen is now glowing green with a big white dot in the middle. And the phone is now also vibrating via its haptic motor. And it says Robin's keys 3 feet away. I'm now 1 foot away. And now it says it stopped vibrating and it says here. And I'm literally right above the keys. Okay. Now, with voiceover turned on, it will also give me those instructions and it'll tell me where the keys or the item happen to be. So people might have come across something called Tile. And Tile's been around for about a decade, actually.
Yeah.
And Tile essentially does a very, very similar thing. But Tile uses Bluetooth rather than ultra wideband and Bluetooth. So if you like, the reason why this might be of interest is not just because it can help you to find things, but the really clever bit of it is if you are unlucky enough to lose something, right, like your keys or your backpack, what you can do with the Find My app and an AirTag is you can send out a message to essentially say that that item is lost, and it will put the item into lost mode. Now, when that happens, what's very clever is that that item will send out a passive signal to anybody who has an iPhone or an iPad, and it will say there's a lost AirTag nearby. And what it will allow you to do is to essentially push a message, which when that person sees there's a lost AirTag, they will then be able to go into the Find My app and discover how they can get that back to you. So, you know, you might make a contact point, or you might have a way of emailing or phoning or whatever. Be up to you how you want to do that. But you can. The idea would be that you can get the item returned to you. Now, think for a moment about the fact that Tile's been around for a decade. So I've heard it said that in a city like New York, you would probably find a Tile every 5 or 6 blocks in the US. So if someone had lost a Tile, there's probably likely to be one every 5 or 6 blocks. There's likely to be an iDevice in pretty much every block. There's likely to be many, several, if not many, in every block. So the network of contact points that there are for something that's lost is a lot bigger with Find My than it is with Tile. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens, because this has kind of come into the market alongside Tile. What Apple will say when they're asked is, well, people have got a choice. They can either buy Tile or they can buy AirTags, you know, and that's their choice. People will choose for all sorts of reasons. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens, because I think the secret sauce with this is not just the ultra wideband support, which doesn't apply for Tile, but also that passive signal emission and the size of the Apple network in terms of, you know, the security of it. So it's really interesting. If someone's going to ask how much an AirTag costs, it's 29 quid. I think you can get a 4-pack for £99. I only bought the one. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because I think all of us who have got sight loss, I mean, I constantly lose things. When Andrew rang earlier on, I answered the call on my watch, and it was because I couldn't find my phone at the time. You know, I'm sure all of you listening you'll have experiences yourself that are not dissimilar, where you lose something, and you know, I had lost my phone, and I actually found it about 2 minutes after we ended the call, Andy, and it was actually in my back pocket. So there you go.
I think this type of technology is great, and do you think the ultra wideband is something that's not just going to be applicable to you know, the AirTags, but in terms of being able to find locations and places, and it seems to be a lot more accurate, so it could work with apps in the future to help you find places?
Absolutely. Just watch this space because there's a lot of stuff coming with ultra wideband. If you think about the fact that at the moment, I say, okay, one of those little Bluetooth, one of those little air tags is like 29 quid. But imagine if you could scale that up, right? And you could utilize that kind of technology, for example, inside a building or maybe even inside a shop, for example. You could utilize ultra wideband technology, not necessarily with the air tags. Maybe you'd use a different kind of receiver, but a receiver that would respond to an ultra wideband radio. So I've mentioned all the iPhone 12s, all models have they have an ultra wideband chip in them. All the iPhone 11s have an ultra wideband chip in them. What you'll start to see before very long is that every single iPhone within a few years will have an ultra wideband chip in it. Now, if you think about at the moment, you've got over a billion iOS users out there right now globally. That's a billion people, right, who could potentially interact with a device or a message. Now, imagine over a period of a few years, imagine when you get to a situation where that community of a billion all have an ultra wideband radio. That's not the case right now. So it would be a much smaller, I'm guessing it might not even be 10% right now, maybe 10, 15% max who have an ultra wideband radio, i.e. they've got an iPhone 11 or 12. What you'll start to find is that not just iPhones, but Android devices as well, and it started already with Samsung, you'll find that an ultra wideband radio becomes a standard component inside a modern smartphone. It's actually already happened. It's happened at the top end and it's trickling down. But as that becomes a standard component inside every smartphone, the opportunity to use UWB or ultra wideband technology will increase. And it's a lot more accurate, as you've seen. That demo hopefully sort of shows you. I mean, I literally was, right on top of the AirTag with my phone when it said you're here. The accuracy is fantastic. It would be within 10 centimeters of something. So that's a big change. And if you think about an indoor environment, imagine an indoor environment where you could navigate to somewhere using ultra wideband and you could just expect to rock up and do that. I think you'll find that happens in all sorts of interesting places, from sports venues to concert halls to maybe even to shops. Now, it's not a magic bullet, right? It's not a magic bullet for locating things, but what it does do is it gives you choice, gives you options to find things, and it's given you a level of accuracy that you can't get with other technologies at the moment. So I think it's quite exciting. It's not a hugely high cost thing. Okay, the devices are expensive. That is absolutely true. But what you'll find is that the next time that Apple release an iPhone SE, a value version of the iPhone, you can bet your bottom dollar it'll include an ultra wideband radio, because it would make absolutely no sense for them to launch another iPhone that didn't have it, irrespective of the price. And also, the more that you build stuff like that, the more the cost comes down. So, as a component for Android manufacturers and for iPhone, it will become a cheaper thing the more people have it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. It is fascinating. And I think, as I say, I've got tiles at the moment, but as soon as I get a new iPhone, I'll definitely get some AirTags for sure. Yeah.
I mean, it will work with the older iPhones. That's the other thing. It works just as nicely. It's just that it won't give you the level of accuracy that you get with the 11 or 12. So it'll still say, you're a meter away or whatever. It just won't give you that pinpoint accuracy. And I also don't think it will do the haptic vibration. So what was happening when I was moving around the room with the phone is that the extent to which the phone was vibrating, and it was vibrating really gently, that vibration was intensifying as I got closer. So it's almost like you could feel it getting closer, and you could also, VoiceOver would speak and tell you that it was getting closer. And if you were using your low vision, there's an enormous number on the screen and a great big arrow that would tell you that you're getting closer to it. And when you're right on top of it, you get a huge white circle on the screen that'll tell you that you're on it. So, they've kind of used a lot of different channels to try and make it quite obvious that you're getting there. But I think for us, this is a really interesting technology. You'll start to see it appearing in all sorts of places. And you will, I'm not a betting man, but I'd be willing to bet that within 2 years of now, pretty much every phone that you buy will have an ultra-wideband chip. It won't be a high-end feature. It will be something that everybody wants. Because if you think about it, it's not just us that could benefit from that. Absolutely everyone that we know and love, even people who've got perfect eyesight, they could really benefit from having something like that, because it just makes life easier, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm sure it won't be long until Tile come up with maybe a comparable product if they can, or whether they've got the ability to do that as well. So hopefully,
it's going to be really interesting, because I think Apple present it as a choice, and I think the position Tile are in is that they can either keep their own platform as it is, or they can build support for the Find My network into Tile. And if they did that, that vastly broadens the network of people who could report a missing tile. But then you could also argue that that's just playing into the hands of the competition. So it's a tricky one.
I think competition's good though in the technology
sector.
It drives things, doesn't it?
Drives innovation. Everything, every single thing that's come about that's benefited people has been about competition. I can remember not that long after VoiceOver appeared on the iPhone, I spent a long time lobbying people at Google to build a screen reader. And some people I remember were saying to me at the time, saying, "But why are you doing that? The iPhone's already got it." And I said, well, look, it's great that the iPhone has it, but to be honest with you, it's actually not good enough, because it needs to be everywhere. Like, there is no reason why any smartphone platform should be closed to people who can't see. That's just wrong. Every single platform should be open.
You've got to have healthy competition, would you say? Healthy competition, yeah.
And the only thing that matters at the end of the day is choice. That's the thing that I want to measure stuff by. If blind people can rock up at a phone store and they can spend half an hour or an hour looking at stuff, I want that to be half an hour or an hour that's really well spent, like it is for someone who can see well. Let's get and try out all the phones, So now it's great. If you go into a high street phone store, you would expect that a smartphone has a screen reader. And that's how it should be. You should expect that there's magnification. You should expect that there's large text, there's dark theme, there's a talk back or voiceover. It's not a luxury. I think when people have talked about parity of experience, that's where it starts. That's just the beginning of the story. The big challenge after that is making sure that apps are built in an accessible way. We've got a lot to do on that. We've got a lot to do to get app developers building really good quality accessible apps out of the box. It's starting to happen, but we've got a long way to go on that.
Absolutely. So Robin, you also telling me today that there's quite a lot of work that you're involved with, and you were looking at getting people's opinions about this as well. Around the e-scooters, and I think you talked a little bit about that.
Yeah, so some of you on the call will have noticed, I'm sure a lot of people will have noticed things in the news recently about e-scooters, asking, people saying, for example, that there are significant safety issues, there are concerns about them being quiet, virtually silent, in fact. And one of the things that we did last year was we started to work with the industry to basically make sure that we could do things that would improve the situation. So we've heard an awful lot on the ground from blind and partially sighted people saying, look, I'm scared, I'm nervous, there's people riding on the pavement, there's an absolute free-for-all as part of the government trials of e-scooters. And I think at that point, the two options that we had really was, one, to sort of be on the sidelines and be campaigning against the existence of e-scooters. But what we know when we travel around the world is that e-scooters are now in more than 200 cities around the world. And some of the first cities in the world to adopt them are now hailing them as a big success. Places like Tel Aviv and Santa Monica and Atlanta. So, it was really clear to us that these things are here to stay. So what we want to do is to work as collaboratively as we can with the industry to make sure that people are safe, to make sure the vehicles are as safe as they can be, to make sure that the operators understand that there are blind people in the community who won't see or hear the vehicle, and to do as much as we can to make them detectable by blind and partially sighted people, and to make them as visible as possible as well. So we're doing a lot of work with e-scooter operators, with regulators, with manufacturers, with infrastructure companies, with universities, with sound labs, really to try and make sure that every piece of that puzzle can work in a way that benefits blind people.
Are we kind of like a retrofit stage, unfortunately, though, as well, with a lot of e-scooters already in existence?
Well, the fortunate statistic right now is that the average lifespan of an electric scooter is more measured in months than it is years right now. And that's because of the harsh environment that they operate in.
Right.
So actually what we're seeing is a really rapid rollout of technology and a rapid upgrade cycle. So every year, in fact, sometimes even sooner than every year, the rental companies are actually designing and bringing on board and into service new models.
All the time.
So, that pretty much, so right now, we know of several of the companies who are designing new vehicles, designing new infrastructure and racks right now. And what we've done is we've worked with them to get in there and make sure that that's designed in as inclusive a way as possible. So I think that the good news on that is the lifespan's quite short, therefore the innovation can trickle through much more quickly. It's a really interesting area for us because, we've all heard about autonomous cars. And I think we talked last time quite a lot about autonomous cars.
Yeah, we did, yeah.
And actually, one of the things that I had the chance to witness in that regard is an electric scooter that has 3 wheels. So it's got 2 at the front and 1 at the back. And it's controlled by onboard artificial intelligence, right? Onboard AI. What that means is that if someone abandons it in the middle of a city centre and they leave it in the middle of the pavement where someone would trip over it, the scooter knows that, and it can actually take itself up to 3 miles per hour on the pavement, and it can park itself in a responsible designated parking spot. But what's even better than that, it can actually recognize a blind person who's walking along with a cane, and it will wait until that person has moved out of their kind of locality, and it will then continue its journey. So we've seen that happen. That technology has been developed. It's kind of available now for fleet operators to roll out. So that's quite interesting, right? Actually, you could suddenly have a situation where it would technically now be possible to eradicate badly parked scooters if you had a certain vehicle type all in one city. So if someone abandoned it in a stupid place, the scooter would know, and it would take itself off carefully and park itself in the right spot. So that problem, if you like, from a technology perspective, that has now been cracked. It's not been rolled out in public, so you won't see it in the UK anywhere just yet, but it's coming. But take it a step further, right? And a colleague of mine said to me recently that, one of the things he'd love to do as a blind person is jump on one, right? So arrive at the station, at Bristol Temple Meads, for example, and you're going to an office that's half a mile from the station. There's actually no reason why you couldn't use the same onboard AI within a designated city centre area and using specific routes there isn't any reason why you couldn't use that AI to actually drive safely the scooter to the location. So it'd be really, really difficult to do it, you know, on a long journey. But if it were a short journey in a designated area that's all mapped out, it actually would be quite easy to do. So imagine a situation where you're looking for what we call last mile transport solution. So you've taken the train or the bus somewhere, but you want to get to such and such an office. It's completely possible for that to be made available for someone who's blind or partially sighted.
Well, let's see, just before we do unmute everybody, those of us that have got the cameras on here, does anybody fancy doing that when they're doing the testing? Oh, there we go. Jenny's got a thumbs up there. I'll do it. I'll give it a go. Yeah. But I want to be able to take over it as well and like take control at some point.
Yeah.
If I can.
Yeah.
But I think what the message then is, actually the first time that I've considered this really, is rather than fight it and say we don't want it, it's let's work. We know it's not going anywhere. Let's come to a compromise and actually work on building in technology that's going to make it safer. Is that the key?
Absolutely. And do you know what? So I remember being in this industry in 2007, right? When touchscreen smartphones started to appear everywhere. And it became really clear that touchscreen was going to be the standard input method for smartphones.
Yeah.
Some of our friends who are blind and partially sighted were among the most vocal opponents to touchscreens. And I actually remember at the time people were saying things like, can we have them banned? Like this is just the end of information access. People were saying that, you know, well-informed, clever people who know their stuff were saying that. And actually fast forward to today and look at Apple as an example. It's become a bit of a darling of the blindness world for some people, but equally Google Android and TalkBack, that's something that's a really hugely valuable service. So actually touchscreen smartphones have become a really good thing for blind people, do you know? And it's just possible that e-scooters could be in the same position when we go forward another 10 or 12 years from now. We could actually be saying, look, these things are great. I can jump on them. I can navigate to where one is with my cane. I can get on it and it can safely take me my last mile journey.
Yeah. Use the ultra band in your iPhone to find the nearest e-scooter.
You see, what it could easily be doing, Andy, is it could be giving you a turn-by-turn description of the route, and it could say, Andy, we're on our way to this office, which is roughly 0.9 of a mile away, and you could have the opportunity for it to tell you everything that you're passing so that you know which stores are nearby. You might know that there's a really nice restaurant that you might fancy popping into, and it would announce it and tell you what was there. Do you know?
Absolutely.
So you've got the option. The technology could deliver all of that, and it could deliver a transportation experience that was accessible to you in the same way that, you know, if you go to Austin, Texas right now, you can actually use a service which is called Waymo One. And Waymo One is a self-driving car service.
Yeah.
And yes, if you're blind, you can use it as well. And what you can do is you can use the app to summon a driverless car, and it will come and pick you up, and it will take you to where you need to go on public roads. You can do that right now.
I can't wait to do that one day. That'll be so cool. I think even more is probably to actually have my own car and in the color that I want, and you know all that. Eventually, one day, you know, we'll get there. Hopefully.
You see, the thing is, actually, the whole notion of actually owning a car is going to change because people will not want to own a car. If you look at the stats for millennials, many of them are not buying cars. If you go back 10 years ago, people who were 20, they were buying cars.
Yeah.
They're not buying them at the rate now that they did 10 years ago. And if you look at the data for cities, for people who live in cities, it's even more stark. You know, young people in cities aren't buying cars, and a lot of that's because they're using bike share, Sometimes they're even using scooter share, and they're using car share, you know? So the whole notion, I think now, is going to be, I won't buy one, but you know what I'll do when there's a special occasion? I'll rent my fantasy car. I'll rent the car that I'd love to have, the car of my dreams. I'll rent it for the weekend, but I'm not going to own one because it's just going to sit on the drive and depreciate. So I think the way that people are thinking is changing. Yeah,
the trends are just changing all the time. And well, shall we? I'll unmute everybody, and we'll let's see what people think. And you're free to unmute yourself if you'd like to. You can press the star and 6 if you're on the phone on Zoom. So interested in your feedback really on what you guys think. Whether you're up for getting in a driverless car, is that something that you could see yourself doing one day? What do you think of the e-scooters, and also what do you think about the being able to find your items more kind of directly using this ultraband technology? There's definitely lots of possibilities out there. So
hello, Robin. I just want to say hello.
Yeah.
What do you think about the driverless, the e-scooters? Would you be willing to jump on one? Give them a go.
I certainly would.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
I think it'd be safer than walking on our pavements.
Yeah. Didn't think Blackpool were that bad apart from shared spaces.
Oh, it's not good. But just to get back to Robin, when Robin came and was still, he just got, you just touched on it, Robin, about the watch. And everybody was absolutely spellbound. You know, it had just come into being, hadn't it? I'm going to say it was around 2014.
Yeah.
So we are casting your mind back a bit.
Yeah, that's right.
The Apple Watch, eh? Yeah.
I think we started to see smartwatches appearing, and it's been really interesting to see where that's gone.
And in terms of feedback, I suppose, about the e-scooters, has anybody had like close encounters with them, or what? Have you got any feedback about whether you can hear them or whether one's nearly ran you over? Has anybody got any feedback on that?
I'm concerned from being deaf of not being able to hear them. I've not come into any encounter with them yet, but I liken it to some of the mobility scooters. And to be honest, some people can be a bit careless on them anyway, but I can imagine they would be quiet. It's not just being visually impaired. I'm also deaf. So I just have a slight concern that I may not hear them.
That is the point, isn't it? They can be quite silent.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, go for it.
Will these, excuse me, I find a voice. Will these e-scooters recognise guide dogs?
So that's absolutely, yeah. I mean, that's absolutely one of the issues. So the locally kind of guided AI that was on the concept vehicle that I looked at, it absolutely would. So that's one of the things you can do, is you can train it to recognize, for example, a person with a guide dog. So you can use machine learning to teach the device that a person who's walking with a dog that's in a harness, it's highly likely that that person will have very little sight. You can teach the vehicle to do that and therefore respond and behave in a certain way, i.e. not to expect that person to be able to see it. So, and it's a bit like, they've done that with self-driving cars as well. So self-driving car will recognize a service animal at a decent distance, actually. And it's then aware of movement.
So it will rely on like a cane or a mobility aid or a guide dog, something that's kind of an
outward flag. And I think it's an interesting point, Andrew, because someone said to me, given that there are e-scooters appearing in towns and cities all over the UK, do you think it's a good idea for blind people now to carry a cane? And I actually said, I think it probably is, because if you're struggling to see where e-scooters are, then one thing that you can do is just make yourself a bit more visible, a bit more discernible. The big challenge we've got is people often don't know that someone's got a sight problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see you crossing the road and they kind of assume, well, he's a young fella crossing the road. He's going to be, he's got no problem. And then obviously then they suddenly realise, oh, hang on, this guy might not be able to see very well. It's too late, and then it's too late type of thing.
But that's a culture shift, isn't it? It's a culture shift, because a lot of people who have sight problems don't want other people to know they've got a sight problem.
Yeah,
absolutely.
They don't want people. So, I mean, I think anybody who's visually impaired should carry a cane. Anyway, you
I
should.
don't feel
yeah,
safe with
I
it.
do. I wouldn't like it, but
Hi, Robin. It's Jenny. I work with Andrew.
Hi.
I think some of that is down to the fact that they've been abused in their local area. They don't understand the significance to the sighted world of having that symbol cane, because the sighted world are not educated enough either.
No,
absolutely. I think the other thing is that, like, me as a young person, when I was a little bit younger, I was in that category. I didn't use the cane, and I learned the hard way. When I was in sticky situations, but as I've grown a little bit older, I've realised how much of a help it can be, because it lets other people know, and it's almost like a people sweeper. Like you're walking down the street and there's a big group of people there. Next minute you just go woof, and they just open up for you. It's
like the partner of the Red
Andrew,
Sea.
can I share an anecdote that really kind of amplifies that point that I think you'll be able to relate to?
Yes, Dave.
So back pandemic. One of the things I'd like to do was to go to the football, and I would go with another man that I know who is also blind. And the thing that really convinced me that using my white cane was a brilliant idea was my friend. He used to say to me, I can't understand. He said, how do you get served so quickly when you go to the bar? So imagine, it's a football match. So you've got a really busy, full pub with hundreds of football fans. Maybe they're all singing, and it's a bit chaotic.
Dave always gets to the front.
and I always managed to get myself to the bar, and I could get my drinks within 5 minutes, which is just unheard of in that kind of environment. And my friend, he said, I cannot believe, how do you do it? Like, every time you always manage to get served, like, so. And I'd end up getting the round. Like, sighted people would say to me, "Yeah, mate, can we tag on to your round or your order or whatever, because I know you're going to get served." And it was simply the fact that I had my white cane in my hand that was recognised.
Dave, it's your round again, Dave. It's your round again.
I know. It's already.
Excellent stuff. I know it is the truth. It can be, it's expensive, but it's convenient.
It's a really interesting point, though, isn't it? Because maybe we just need to do more collectively to make people feel good about carrying it.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm on the Visionary Forum for Peer Support Group with for those with sight loss, and the first meeting we had was to have the whole discussion as to how we are identified. Are we identified as VI or blind or all the different acronyms out there for us? And then you've got some people going, my blindness doesn't define me. Well, it doesn't define any of us. However, it is a very important part of our life, and it is part of your identity, whether you want it to be or not. Being blonde is part of my identity. Definitely. I can change that. I can stick my head in a bucket of paint. But if you're bold, it's not quite as easy to go get a wig. So it's part of your identity. And I think we have to learn. Definitely. And we have to be educated, and I think it's got to go into schools and things to kind of do that, because now Andrew's probably one of the few people that have been now to a school designed specifically for his sight loss, or just for hardly any schools for the deaf anymore and things like that, because everything is
Jenny,
mainstream. Do you know what I mean? So that and I think RNIB and some of the other big national charities have got the the means there to try and help change the education system, and then be supported by the likes of Galloway's and other local sight loss charities to kind of help with that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I think as well, you want AI technology not to do its job kind of not to do its job kind of under the radar. I mean, it would be nice for AI technology to actually say that, there is a blind, even if you're in a driverless car, we've slowed down because there is a blind person crossing the road. So not to just do it without telling the user of the technology why the AI is doing what it's doing. We need AI to tell the general public as well, this is why the AI has made this decision, because there's a visually impaired person there, or there's a, that's what we need. Otherwise, we become reliant on technology as well. Whilst technology is brilliant, we want to educate people.
Sat-nav proved that.
Yeah.
Sat-nav proved that. Turn left, okay, bang, straight. Well, it told me to. Yes, but it's to be used in conjunction with your sight and common sense. But Andrew's right in the fact that AI, this kind of AI, isn't for us. It's a generic thing. We get the best benefit out of it. That's the way to perceive it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Touched on something. A question I was going to raise too about that. The AI stopping to let a blind person cross the road with an autonomous car. The one question I wanted to ask Robin about, because you're working with electric car, self-autonomous car developers. Obviously, we're living in an age now where most visually impaired people have a smartphone with them. Obviously, it's going to be a bit, I know, before nearly every other car on the road is going to be autonomous, but we've got to be ready for that day. Is going to be, obviously, some people won't know that autonomous car has stopped to let us cross the road. Will that then send a communication to the smartphone to say, right, it's safe for you to cross the road?
No, that's a good idea.
That's an amazing idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there's absolutely potential to do that now, and in fact, it's something that has formed part of the Waymo trials in the US, and it's kind of dependent on, essentially, if you had a device, it would be very possible for you to be made aware that a vehicle has, yielded or is stationary, and you can then cross over. So, you can do that tech-wise. You can do that quite easily.
Yes.
I think one of the big things to play out. One of the big things to play out really is
the software that people have on their existing phones now.
You could do that. You could do that with a number of different apps that people have now. In a sense, you're using a camera, you're using a little bit of machine learning, and you're issuing commands. So that's not going to be a technically difficult thing to do. I guess the bigger challenge almost, though, is what are people carrying and what are people using?
Yeah.
And also, not everybody wants to walk around with their smartphone out. So one of the things that will help is wearable devices, more and more wearable technology that incorporates a camera.
The ecosystem as well, Robin, like with what we've seen from likes of Apple and Google working with each other throughout the COVID crisis to create technology together. We need a solution. That means it doesn't matter what smartphone you've got or what operating system you're running. You can tap into the same network. There has to be one for all, doesn't there, really?
So it's exactly like the smart home. So one of the things that happened earlier this month is that there was a protocol announced which essentially will work across Apple, Google, and Amazon smart home products. And basically it will allow designers to create products which operate within certain parameters. And all of those manufacturers have signed up to it, Samsung as well, essentially so that you've got more of a standard that everybody can work with. And I think you're right. I think accessibility is now in the domain where it's a collaborative issue rather than a competitive one.
Definitely.
It's doing everything for the. It's doing.
I thought of, you know, when crossing the road, because we at the moment we listen, don't we? We listen, and if we've got some vision, we use our eyes, you know, and it's. And then you could go a step further. My taxi's arrived, couldn't you? We already get the text message. Where is it? Yeah. I mean, I've got some. Even at night time, I didn't know my taxi was. Quite a bit away from the
That's
platform.
a nightmare, that one.
Yeah.
At night time, a place in Morecambe called a platform. I don't mean a platform literally. It's like a theatre type place.
Yeah.
I think it's doing the, you know, the whole thing about making this an ecosystem, and even that example of the Find My app and other companies being able to tap into that. It's basically with the accessibility side of things, making an environment, and it's for the greater good, and hopefully companies come together and realize that, you know.
Another little example of this, just in case people aren't aware. So Facetime that you can use on iPhones. From September, you will be able to use that. You'll be able to join a Facetime call on any platform. So if you have an iPhone, you've got friends that have got Android phones, you'll be able to schedule a FaceTime meeting and send a link out like you can with Zoom.
It's great.
And anybody will be able to join your FaceTime call.
That's the culture, though, isn't it? Do you think, Robin, that the culture of with everything that's happened in the last 15 months, so many new trends have gone forward, and the digital trends, using Zoom, using Teams, I think Apple have kind of been, you know, to stay in that market, they've had to kind of conform to these new trends, haven't they? You know,
absolutely.
And that's what it is.
Yeah, within the space of a year, Zoom has become a verb. It's gone into the language as a verb. I'll Zoom you. You know, even for people who are not even connected with tech. So, you know, the only thing you can do is take note of that and then open up your system a little bit to let more people use it. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out.
I think Zoom has become like, it did used to be FaceTime. So people used to say things like, I did a FaceTime with my sister yesterday, and then I would find out they didn't use FaceTime, they'd used Skype, but they would say FaceTime. Zoom now has taken over, because people say, I did a Zoom yesterday, and you go, and I'll help you out with it. And then when you go to help them, it's like, actually, they're using Google Hangouts or they're using Teams or something like that. But Zoom has took the center stage, is the word, which is hugely powerful, as we know, you know, for them. It's just come on leaps and bounds.
So quickly then, Robin, sorry, it's Jenny again. From the electric car stroke scooter point of view, that technology from the autonomous ones to go into the electric one, because the UK government have said, haven't they, they've given us like a 30-year cut off, and that's it, electric cars only and things, and they don't make a noise. I don't like them. Even the current electric cars, there's very little sound from them when you're already on a busy road trying to cross it. And nearly been squished a couple of times. Some form of indication on those has got to be the way forward. You can hear most cars, and I get they're trying to reduce pollution and noise pollution and things, but that's, you know, safety of people has got to come.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more, Jenny. Do you know, and I think one of the challenges is actually to make that sound contextual, so that if you're driving through a town or a village, for example, and you're driving at a low speed, that should actually be emitting more noise that's at a frequency that will be easier for people to hear, but it won't be disruptive to residents. You know, it's quite a fine balance, but essentially what I would say is any kind of audible vehicle alert system, it should be contextually aware of where the vehicle is. Because if you're on the motorway at 70 miles an hour, you don't need it. But you definitely do need it whenever you're like.
You shouldn't be crossing a motorway. I know some people do.
There are a few crazies out there, David.
That's it.
Doesn't it? And I just couldn't. I don't know whether they must have nerves of steel.
I think that definitely is the way to go, Robin. If
you haven't got any nerves.
And equally, you know, if an electric car is stationary but there are people in it and it's at the traffic lights, it should arguably be emitting like a heartbeat sound. just so that you know that it's actually there.
Yeah, because if you think, oh, you know, because the cone doesn't always work on the traffic lights, and if you're like me and your grey car's blurred into the grey background on the grey road when it's a grey miserable day, you don't see it. You know, if it's right. Neon pink, like there's a neon pink Beetle round here by me. I know where that is. That's great.
We like bright colours, don't we?
Yeah, you like bright colours.
Well, listen, guys, I'm gonna say a big, massive. I know Robin's got to go now. I'm gonna give Robin a big, huge thanks, Robin, again for joining us again today, and I hope that we can get you to join us again maybe next year again.
Yeah, be a pleasure, guys. It's been lovely. At some point,
we'll have our regular updates with you, Robin. It's a pleasure. Awesome. It's really great, and also Dave Williams came on last month as well and did a really great session with us as well. So we've had a brilliant update from the highs of RNIB and things that are going on. It's fantastic to hear everything, and yours and Dave's dedication and our and RNIB as a whole to the innovation of technology and making sure that blind and partially sighted people's voices are heard. It's fantastic stuff. So thank you very much for joining us, Robin.
No, thanks for having us, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Robin.
See you again soon,
guys. Robin. Bye.
Take care.